Ethan Harper had never seen a place like this before. The towering, shimmering spires of the alien city pierced the sky, their sleek surfaces reflecting the soft glow of the twin moons above. It was beautiful, and yet it filled him with a sense of unease. This was not Earth. This was the planet of the Zara, a proud alien species who had long looked down on humanity. But today, that was about to change. Ethan was here on a mission, one that was simple in theory but complex in execution. He was a human diplomat, well respected for his skills in negotiation, and had been tasked with delivering a message to the Zaran Council. But this was no ordinary diplomatic mission. The message he carried was a warning, one that, if ignored, would change the course of history. The alien princess, Lyra, was held captive by a warlord named Zorak. Lyra was the last hope for peace among the fractured Zaran Empire. Her people adored her, and her strength could unite the different factions of their world. But Zorak, a ruthless ruler, had seized her in an attempt to solidify his power. He planned to marry her, forcing her to rule by his side and bend her people to his will. The Zaran Council, however, didn't see things the same way. They had dismissed Lyra's importance and believed that her captivity was nothing more than a political move. They were wrong, and that's why Ethan was here. He had to convince them. He had to make them understand that freeing Lyra was the only path to saving their world. Ethan stood in the heart of the council chamber, his posture straight, his expression calm. The council members sat in their grand, high-backed chairs, their faces impassive as they listened to his words. Ethan had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times, but now as he spoke, he realized how difficult it was to make them understand. "I'm here to deliver a simple message," Ethan began, his voice steady. "Princess Lyra must be freed. If she is not, the human forces will intervene. You may not think much of humanity, but we are prepared to act, if necessary." The council's reaction was immediate. The room filled with murmurs of disbelief, followed by laughter. The Zaran ambassador, a tall, regal figure named Zorath, stood first. "This is outrageous," Zorath said, his voice thick with disdain. "You, a human, are threatening us with intervention? The Zaran Empire has stood for thousands of years. We do not bow to threats, especially not from creatures as primitive as yourselves." Ethan's heart sank, but he did not let his composure falter. He had expected this reaction. The Zarans saw themselves as superior to humans. Their technology was far more advanced, their empire vast and powerful. To them, humans were little, more than an annoyance. "I'm not here to threaten you," Ethan replied calmly. "I'm here to help you. You may think you can control the situation, but you cannot. The longer you keep Princess Lyra in captivity, the more your empire will fracture. The warlord Zorak's rule is unstable. He rules through fear, not love. And when the people rise up against him, they will demand her release." Another council member, a quiet woman with sharp eyes named Kira, spoke up. "You don't understand our ways, human. The princess is a symbol, yes, but she is not the only answer. Zorak is the strongest leader we've ever had. If we free her, it will be seen as a weakness. The galaxy will think we're divided." Ethan nodded, acknowledging her point. "I understand your fears, but you're wrong. Zorak is not strong. He is a dictator. The people do not follow him out of respect. They follow him out of fear. If you keep Lyra imprisoned, you risk everything. If you free her, you can unite the Empire. She will bring peace, not just for the Zarans, but for the galaxy." The council fell silent, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if he had finally gotten through to them. But when Zorath spoke again, it was clear that his words had fallen on deaf ears. "You humans always think you know better," Zorath sneered. "What makes you think your words hold any weight here? Our empire is not some child's plaything you can simply rearrange. The Zaran people are strong, We will decide our future, and if we choose to keep the princess under our control, so be it. Ethan took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edge of the council table. He had to remain calm. He had to make them understand. "Let me be clear," Ethan said, his voice growing firmer. "If Princess Lyra is not freed within 48 hours, the humans will act. We are prepared for war. We will come for her, and we will free her, whether you like it or not." Zorath's expression hardened, and the other council members exchanged uncertain glances. But no one spoke. Ethan could feel the tension in the room, thick and heavy like the calm before a storm. It was clear that his warning had been heard, but it was also clear that they did not believe he would follow through. Ethan stood up, his body tense with anticipation. "You have 48 hours, he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "If you don't act, we will." Without waiting for a response, Ethan turned and walked out of the council chamber. As the doors closed behind him, he felt a mix of frustration and determination. The Tsarans had ignored his warning, but he would not back down. He had done what he could. Now, the fate of the princess and the galaxy was in their hands. Ethan Harper walked through the long corridors of the Tsaran capital, his mind heavy with thoughts of what he had just left behind. The council's dismissal of his warning echoed in his ears. They had laughed at him, underestimated him, and now he had no choice but to prepare for the next steps. He knew that the Tsarans wouldn't act unless forced to, and he was running out of time. As he made his way back to his temporary quarters, his steps quickened. He had to think of something, anything, to stop the Tsaran Empire from destroying itself. The last thing he wanted was a war, but he couldn't allow Lyra's life to be wasted in the hands of a tyrant like Zorak. Inside his room, Ethan paced back and forth. The walls felt too close, the air too still. He took a seat at the desk, his fingers running through his hair in frustration. The princess, Princess Lyra, was a symbol of hope. Her people adored her, and her strength could heal a broken empire. But they didn't see that. They didn't understand the power she could bring, not just to her people, but to the entire galaxy. Ethan pulled up a map of the Tsaran system on his datapad. His eyes traced the lines between planets, each one marked with the threat of war. The situation was getting worse by the minute. The longer Lyra remained in captivity, the more the empire would fracture. Even the Tsaran Council could not ignore the whispers of rebellion growing louder by the day. Zorak's grip on power was slipping, but he had enough resources to make anyone who opposed him pay the price. "Hours," Ethan muttered to himself, a grim expression crossing his face. That's how much time they have. He had no intention of waiting that long. If the council didn't act, then the humans would. Ethan had already sent word to General Tessa Kane, his superior back on Earth, and the message was clear. The human fleet was ready, and they would not hesitate to move in, but he hoped, no, he prayed, that it wouldn't come to that. He needed to find another way. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Ethan straightened up, wiping the thoughts from his mind. It was probably one of the Tsaran officials, maybe even Zorath, coming to tell him that his warning had been heard, and that he would be removed from the planet. Ethan opened the door, prepared for the worst. Instead, standing before him was a young Tsaran woman with short, silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She was dressed in plain clothes, not the formal attire of the council, and her expression was serious. "You're Ethan Harper, the human diplomat?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Kayla," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm a member of the underground resistance." Ethan's eyes widened. "Resistance? Against Zorak?" Kayla glanced over her shoulder, making sure no one was watching. Then, without waiting for his response, she stepped inside. "We've been watching you, human. We know you're trying to free the princess." Ethan felt a rush of hope. "You're on our side?" Kayla nodded. We want her free. We want her to lead us. Zorak's reign has brought nothing but misery to our people. The council may not care, but we do. We can't just sit back and let this continue. Ethan felt a surge of relief. He had been right. There were others who understood. What can we do? Kayla took a deep breath. We can get you to the fortress where Lyra is being held. But it won't be easy. The warlord has surrounded her with guards and high-tech security. If you really want to free her, you'll need more than words. You'll need action. Ethan felt a weight settle in his chest. I know. I've already warned the council, but they refuse to listen. Now we need to make sure we're ready. I'll need your help. Kayla nodded again, determination in her eyes. We've been planning for months. We've already smuggled in weapons, and we've got a network of allies inside the city. We'll help you get to her. But you must promise us one thing. When Lyra is free, she must lead us. Not Zorak, not the council. Her. Ethan stared at her, weighing her words carefully. This wasn't just about freeing the princess. This was about giving her the power to change her world. And he knew, deep down, that this was the right thing to do. I promise, he said firmly, but I'll need your help to make it happen. No one else can know about this. Kayla's eyes softened. We'll make it happen. You have my word. Over the next few hours, Kayla took Ethan through the underground tunnels beneath the city, showing him secret pathways that led to the fortress where Lyra was being held. As they walked, Ethan asked her about the rebellion. How had they managed to stay hidden for so long? We have to be careful, Kayla explained. Zorak's forces are everywhere. They've infiltrated every part of our society. But we're patient. We wait for the right moment, and when we strike hard. Ethan admired her resolve. He had heard of underground movements before, but seeing it firsthand was different. The Tsarans were fighting for more than just freedom. They were fighting for hope. Finally, they reached a hidden chamber beneath the fortress walls. This is where it all begins, Kayla whispered. From here, we'll move forward. Ethan nodded, his heart racing. The time was now. He had warned the Tsaran council, but their pride had led them to ignore him. Now, he would have to make them see. If they wouldn't free Lyra, he and the rebels would. As they prepared for the mission ahead, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of determination wash over him. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He wouldn't stop until Princess Lyra was free. And with the rebellion by his side, he was ready to do whatever it took. The night was quiet, too quiet for Ethan's liking. As he stood outside the hidden chamber, he felt a tension in the air, a sense that everything was about to change. He had seen the rebellion's preparations firsthand, but now the real test was beginning. The moment of truth had arrived. He had done everything he could to warn the Tsaran Council, and they had ignored him. Now it was time to act. Kayla and her team of rebels had worked tirelessly to prepare for this mission. They had planned every detail, from the secret routes beneath the city to the exact moment they would strike. Ethan had his doubts, but he trusted them. They were the ones who knew this world better than anyone, and they were fighting for something much bigger than just one princess. They were fighting for the future of their people. Ethan turned to Kayla, who stood beside him, her eyes sharp and focused. "Are we ready?" he asked. She nodded, her face a mask of determination. "We've waited for this moment for a long time. We know the risks, but we have to move now. The princess can't stay locked up any longer." The small group of rebels behind them was also ready. They were armed with quiet, advanced weapons designed to take down Zorak's soldiers without making a sound. They had all trained for this, and now they would see if they could pull it off. The fortress loomed ahead, a massive structure of steel and stone. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their figures shadowed by the flickering lights from the tall towers. But Kayla had shown Ethan a secret path that led them into the inner sanctum of the fortress, and that's where they would make their move. "We move quickly and quietly," Kayla instructed. her voice barely above a whisper. "Once we reach the princess, we'll have to deal with the guards. But it'll be quick. We don't have much time." Ethan nodded. The plan seemed simple, but he knew the reality would be far more complicated. The Tsarans had some of the best security systems in the galaxy. The rebellion's success depended on their ability to stay hidden and act fast. They crept through the shadows, moving like ghosts through the fortress. Ethan's heart raced with every step, his mind alert to any sounds or movements. He could hear the distant hum of the Tsaran soldiers, but they were far enough away that their presence didn't pose a threat. Yet. As they reached a narrow hallway, Kayla signaled for everyone to stop. She crouched low, peering around the corner. "2 guards ahead," she whispered. "We'll need to take them out quietly." Ethan glanced at the small group of rebels. They were ready. The leader, Kayla, gestured to one of the rebels, a tall, quiet man named Ral, who moved swiftly toward the guards. Without a sound, Ral took them both down, his movements quick and efficient. They never saw it coming. "Clear," Kayla whispered, and they continued. As they moved deeper into the fortress, Ethan's mind began to focus more on the task ahead. The princess was somewhere inside, waiting for them. The human diplomat wasn't a soldier, but he had trained for situations like this. He had to be ready to protect her, no matter what it took, after what felt like hours of moving through dark corridors and avoiding patrols. They finally reached a large steel door at the end of a hallway. Kayla took a deep breath, then turned to Ethan. "This is it. The princess is inside." Ethan nodded, his throat dry. He had warned the council. He had warned Zorak. Now it was time to make good on that promise. The door opened silently, revealing a large chamber. In the center stood Princess Lyra, her long silver hair falling around her shoulders like a halo. She looked exhausted but still regal, her eyes fierce as she turned to face them. When she saw Ethan, her expression softened, and for a moment, the tension in the room seemed to lift. "You came," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We promised," Ethan replied, walking toward her. "We're getting you out of here." But before they could move, the sound of alarms filled the air. The fortress had detected their presence. The walls began to shake, and the unmistakable sound of Tsaran soldiers rushing toward them echoed down the hall. "They know we're here," Kayla said urgently. "We need to move now!" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The escape would be harder than they thought. The soldiers would be coming in full force. But there was no turning back now. They had to get Lyra out, or everything they had worked for would be lost. Kayla led the group to another hidden exit. But as they moved through the hallways, the sound of footsteps grew louder. They weren't going to make it out without a fight. Suddenly, a group of Zorak's elite guards appeared at the end of the corridor, blocking their path. They were heavily armed, their weapons glowing with the deadly energy of the Tsaran military. "Move!" Kayla shouted, raising her weapon and firing at the guards. The shot hit one of them, but the others were fast. They returned fire, their weapons crackling with power. The rebels ducked, taking cover as the firefight began. Ethan ducked behind a pillar, his heart pounding. He wasn't a soldier, but he had to do something. He grabbed a blaster from one of the rebels and peeked out from behind the cover. He aimed at one of the guards, his hands shaking as he pulled the trigger. The shot hit its mark. The guard collapsed to the ground, but the battle wasn't over. More guards poured into the hallway, and the firefight intensified. Kayla shouted orders, directing her team to keep moving. They had to get to the exit. Lyra's safety depended on it. Ethan followed, firing his blaster when he could. The Tsaran soldiers were fast and skilled, but the rebels were relentless. They fought with everything they had, determined not to let this moment slip away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the hidden exit. The group rushed through it, emerging into the cold night air. But the battle was far from over. The escape was only the beginning. Ethan looked. Back at the fortress, now illuminated by the chaos of the fight. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. But Zorak wasn't going to let Lyra go easily. This fight was only going to get worse. As they ran toward safety, Ethan's thoughts were clear. The battle had just begun, but they had taken the first step. And he wouldn't stop until Princess Lyra was free, and Zorak was defeated. The night was growing colder as Ethan and the rebels sprinted through the narrow alleyways, Princess Lyra safe in their midst. Their hearts raced, the adrenaline of the escape still pulsing through their veins. But the danger wasn't over yet. They had to get to the human fleet waiting on the outskirts of the city, or they would be caught. And if they were caught, everything they had worked for would be lost. Ethan glanced at Lyra, whose face was calm but weary. She had been through so much, and now, finally, she was free. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small smile as she caught Ethan's gaze. "You came for me," she said, her voice soft yet strong. Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of pride and determination. "Of course, we promised we'd get you out." The sound of pursuit echoed in the distance. Zorak's forces were close, too close. Ethan could hear the sound of boots pounding the ground, the hum of advanced alien technology. They were being hunted. They had to keep moving. Kayla, the leader of the rebel group, signaled for everyone to move faster. "This way!" she ordered, turning sharply into another narrow path. "We need to reach the safe house before they find us." The group followed quickly, moving through the maze-like city. The lights from the towering buildings above cast long shadows, and the streets were eerily silent except for the pounding of their feet. It felt as if the entire city was on alert, ready to close in on them. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, the weight of their mission pressing down on him. It wasn't just about the escape now, it was about everything. The future of Lyra's people, the stability of the Tsaran Empire, and the fate of the galaxy. The human fleet was their last hope for a safe retreat. But even that was uncertain. Would they be able to reach it before Zorak's forces surrounded them? The group made their way into a hidden safe house beneath an abandoned building, a place where the rebels had stashed supplies and weapons. As they entered, Kayla quickly sealed the door behind them, locking it with a quiet click. The room was dim, lit only by a few flickering lights. They were safe, for now. "We have a few minutes," Kayla said, her voice sharp and focused. "We need to make sure they don't follow us here. If they do, we'll need to fight our way out." Ethan's heart was still racing, but he took a deep breath. "We'll be ready," he said, his voice steady. He turned to Lyra, who was now sitting on a crate, her eyes focused ahead. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked her, concern in his eyes. Lyra nodded slowly. "I'm fine, but we have to keep moving. We can't stop now." Kayla paced back and forth, her mind clearly working through their next move. "Once we leave here, we need to head toward the extraction point. The human fleet will be waiting for us, but it won't be easy. Zorak will be sending everything he has to stop us." The tension in the room grew. Ethan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on them. The escape had gone smoothly so far, but it was only a matter of time before Zorak's forces found them. They needed to leave, and they needed to leave now. "We'll have to move quickly," Kayla said, turning to the group. "We'll split into two teams. One will go ahead to distract the guards at the extraction point, and the other will bring Lyra. We'll need to be fast and precise." Ethan nodded. "We're with you. Let's do this." The rebels quickly made their preparations. They checked their weapons, gathered supplies, and reviewed their plan. Ethan felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. He wasn't a soldier, but in this moment, he knew that he had to be. If they failed now, everything would be lost. Kayla approached him, her face serious. "Ethan, you're coming with us. We'll need you to stay with Lyra and make sure she's protected. The rest of us will handle the distraction." Ethan nodded again. "Understood." We'll get her out, no matter what. With the plan set, the rebels moved out of the safe house, slipping back into the dark streets of the city. They moved as quietly as possible, the sounds of their footsteps drowned out by the noise of the city. Ethan stayed close to Lyra, his hand resting lightly on his blaster. They couldn't afford any mistakes. Not now. As they approached the extraction point, the sound of Zorak's forces grew louder. They were closing in, and the clock was ticking. Ethan's pulse quickened. It felt like time was slipping away faster than they could move. They reached a narrow alley that led directly to the extraction point. It was a dangerous route, one that would expose them to the enemy if they weren't careful. Kayla signaled for them to stop and take cover behind a large crate. The alley was dark, the only light coming from distant street lamps, casting eerie shadows across the narrow passage. Kayla's voice was a whisper. "We'll have to make a run for it. Once we hit the extraction point, the fleet will provide cover. We just have to get there." Ethan could see the fear in the eyes of the rebels, but there was something else there, too. Hope. They had made it this far. They couldn't stop now. With a nod, they moved out, rushing down the alley and toward the open space at the end. As they reached the extraction point, the unmistakable roar of Dzaran engines echoed in the distance. Zorak's forces were closing in. "Move! Move!" Kayla shouted. They made it to the extraction point just as the first of Zorak's soldiers appeared behind them. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched the ships in the distance, waiting to provide cover. It was now or never. A loud crash rang out as one of the rebels fired a shot, taking down a guard. The rest of the team fought back, providing a distraction as the humans made their way toward the ships. The rebels held their ground, but they were vastly outnumbered. "Get Lyra to the ship!" Kayla yelled. Ethan turned to Lyra, who was already moving toward the ship. He could see the pain in her eyes, pain from the years of captivity, pain from the loss of her people. But she wasn't giving up. She was fighting. Ethan followed her, his eyes scanning the battlefield. They were almost there. Just a few more steps. Suddenly, a Dzaran soldier appeared directly in front of him, aiming a weapon at Lyra. Without thinking, Ethan raised his blaster and fired, hitting the soldier square in the chest. The soldier fell, but the noise had attracted. "More attention! Move!" Kayla shouted again. They were almost there. The extraction point was just ahead. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the rebel group struggle to keep the advancing Dzaran forces at bay. His mind was focused, but his body was tense. Time was running out, and every second counted. The ships from the human fleet were just moments away, but Zorak's soldiers were closing in quickly. They needed to move fast, or the entire plan would fall apart. "Lyra, we need to move faster," Ethan shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the open space where the ships awaited. Her expression was determined, but there was a trace of fear in her eyes. She had never known true freedom until now. The weight of everything, the rebellion, the hope of her people, her future, was heavy. But she wouldn't let fear stop her. She kept running beside Ethan, pushing forward. Kayla's voice cut through the noise of the battle. "We're almost there. Keep pushing forward." The rebel group, though outnumbered, fought fiercely. Each soldier took down as many guards as they could, but the odds were against them. The Dzaran forces were relentless, and the sounds of blasters echoed around them, mixing with the chaos of the streets. Ethan's hand gripped his blaster tightly, his focus shifting between Lyra, the rebels, and the approaching soldiers. The human fleet was near, but they couldn't wait much longer. The first wave of enemy soldiers had already taken position to block their exit. It felt like they were surrounded, and the weight of that reality settled on Ethan's shoulders. If they didn't make it to the ships, they would be trapped. "Go! Go!" Kayla shouted again, her voice filled with urgency. Ethan pushed Lyra ahead, urging her to keep moving. They were almost there, just a few more steps. But just as they were nearing the ships, a loud explosion echoed through the air. The ground shook beneath their feet, and smoke billowed from a nearby building. The rebel team was forced to stop, ducking behind crates and debris as the explosion rocked the area. "Cover!" Kayla yelled. "Get down!" The rebels scattered, finding whatever cover they could. Ethan and Lyra dropped behind a large metal crate, crouching low. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of blaster fire were deafening. Zorak's soldiers had launched a counterattack, and now the streets were a battleground. Through the smoke, Ethan could see the silhouettes of the enemy soldiers advancing. He gritted his teeth, clutching his blaster. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The fleet was supposed to provide cover, but the explosion had delayed everything. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. "Ethan," Lyra said, her voice trembling but determined. "We have to get out of here." He nodded, his eyes scanning the scene. There was no time for hesitation. "We're not leaving anyone behind," he said firmly. "We fight to the end." Kayla emerged from behind the crate, firing a shot at the approaching soldiers. The blast hit one of the guards, taking him down instantly. "We need to create a path to the ships," Kayla said. "We're almost there. Just hold your ground a little longer." Ethan didn't hesitate. He joined Kayla, firing his blaster, at the soldiers closing in on their position. The shots were accurate, but there were too many of them. The Tsaran forces seemed endless, and the rebel group was growing smaller with each passing second. They had to move before they were completely overwhelmed. "Lyra, stay close," Ethan ordered, pulling her behind him. She nodded, her face grim, but resolute. With one last effort, Kayla led the group toward the ships, firing at the soldiers as they went. The sound of weapons fire filled the air as the rebels held off the enemy for just long enough to make it to the open ground. But they were losing ground fast. Ethan's pulse quickened as he saw Zorak's forces pushing harder, determined to stop them from escaping. Then, through the thick smoke, a new sound reached Ethan's ears. The unmistakable hum of Tsaran engines. The fleet. "Look!" Lyra gasped, pointing toward the sky. The human ships had arrived, soaring through the smoke-filled air like a wave of salvation. Their advanced technology was far superior to Zorak's, and they moved swiftly, their engines roaring as they locked onto their targets. Zorak's forces hesitated for a moment, taken off guard by the sudden appearance of the fleet. That brief hesitation was all the rebels needed. Kayla led the charge, her team following closely behind. The rebel group fought with renewed strength, pushing through the smoke and toward the ships. "Get to the ships! Now!" Kayla shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Ethan and Lyra sprinted toward the nearest ship, with the rest of the rebels close behind. The sound of blaster fire grew louder as the Tsaran soldiers tried to regroup and block their exit, but the human fleet opened fire, taking out their defenses one by one. Just as they reached the ship, Ethan glanced back. Kayla and the remaining rebels were still fighting, keeping the enemy forces occupied. They had given everything to get this far. "We're here," Lyra said, her voice filled with relief as she boarded the ship. Ethan followed closely behind her, glancing back one last time at the scene they were leaving behind. The city of Zara, once the heart of a powerful empire, was now in chaos. But in that moment, Ethan knew that the future of this world, the future of Lyra's people, had changed forever. As the ship's door closed, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. They had made it. They had escaped. The fight was far from over, but for now, they had won. The ship's engines roared to life, and they soared into the sky, leaving the war-torn city behind. Ethan watched as the fleet moved in formation, their strength now undeniable. They had shown the Tsaran Empire that humanity wasn't something to be taken lightly. They had freed Princess Lyra, and in doing so, had started a revolution that would change everything. Ethan turned to Lyra, who stood beside him, her eyes focused on the stars ahead. "We did it," Ethan said quietly. Lyra smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "Yes, but this is only the beginning." And as they flew into the unknown, Ethan knew she was right. The battle was far from over, but together they would face whatever came next. The ship sped through the stars, its sleek design cutting through the vastness of space. Ethan stood by the large window, watching the stars pass by, a sense of relief washing over him. They had made it. The escape had been a success. Princess Lyra was safe, and the human fleet had provided the support they needed to make it out alive. The journey had been long, but it wasn't over. The battle they had fought on the ground was just the beginning. The real work would come later, convincing the people of the Tsaran Empire that change was necessary. But for now, they had won. Beside him, Lyra stood, her gaze fixed on the stars. As well, her face, though tired, was filled with determination. She had lived through so much, but this was only the beginning of her true journey. "You did it," Ethan said quietly, turning toward her. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes softening. "We did it," she corrected. "Without you and your people, I would still be in that cell." Ethan smiled. "We all played a part. But you're the one who will lead them. You're the one who will bring peace." Lyra nodded, though a shadow passed over her face. "The road ahead won't be easy. Zorak is gone, but his supporters are still out there. They won't give up without a fight." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, a reassuring gesture. "We'll be ready. The human fleet is here to stay. Together we can make sure your people have a future. You're not alone in this." The ship's intercom buzzed to life, cutting through the quiet moment. "Princess Lyra," came the voice of General Tessa Kane, leader of the human forces. "We'll be entering Tsaran space in an hour. The fleet is preparing for the next phase of the mission." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "Understood. We'll be ready." Ethan could feel the weight of what was to come. The Tsaran Empire was fractured. There would be those who would resist Lyra's leadership, those who still supported Zorak's ideals. The fight was not over, but for the first time, there was hope. Lyra was free, and the people of Zara had a chance at a better future. As the ship entered Tsaran space, the view outside shifted. The once dark expanse of space began to reveal the glowing lights of the Tsaran homeworld, the planet they had fought for, the world that would soon begin a new chapter. The human fleet arrived in full force, its ships forming a protective barrier around Lyra's vessel. The show of strength was deliberate, a signal to any who would challenge the new order. The Tsarans may have thought they were the strongest in the galaxy, but now they had a new ally, and that would change everything. Lyra took a deep breath as the planet came into view. "This is it," she said. "The real work begins now." Ethan nodded. "We'll be with you every step of the way." The ship began its descent toward the planet's surface. Below, the capital city was a mixture of ancient buildings and modern structures, a symbol of the Tsaran people's long history and their struggle for unity. But the city was also a battleground, divided by factionalism and distrust. For Lyra to lead them, she would have to bridge those divisions. When the ship finally landed, the door opened to a scene of tense anticipation. Lyra stepped off the ship, her face determined but solemn. She was met by the representatives of the Tsaran Council, who stood waiting, their expressions unreadable. Ethan followed closely behind her, ready for whatever came next. He knew that Lyra would have to be careful. The Council had long resisted any form of human involvement in their world, and now they had no choice but to face the consequences of their decisions. Sorath, the Tsaran ambassador who had laughed at Ethan's warning, stood among the council members. His face was a mask of anger, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he saw Lyra standing before him, free and strong. You have returned," Zorath said, his voice cold. "And you bring humans with you. What is this? Is this your idea of a new era?" Lyra stood tall, her voice firm but calm. "This is a new era for the Tsaran people, one where we unite, not divide. The people of Zara deserve peace, and I intend to give it to them. We don't need to rely on fear or oppression to rule, Zorath sneered. And you think the humans will help us? You've lost your mind, princess. No, Lyra said, her voice unwavering. The humans are our allies now. They saved me, and they'll help us rebuild. We can't go back to the way things were. I will not rule through fear. The council murmured among themselves, some faces showing resistance, others a glimmer of hope. They had always feared change, but the events of the past days had shaken their world to its core. Zorak was gone, and with him, the old way of doing things. Your people are divided, princess, another council member, Kira, said, her voice softer than Zorath's. But perhaps it is time for a new path. A path where we can all move forward. Lyra turned to face her, her eyes full of resolve. It will not be easy, but it is the only way. Together, we can rebuild. But we must stand united. No more wars. No more bloodshed. Ethan watched as the council members looked at each other, a mix of fear and curiosity in their eyes. Lyra's words were powerful, and they were beginning to sink in. It's time for us to stand together, Lyra continued. And if we do, the Tsaran Empire will not just survive, it will thrive. The room fell silent, and for a moment it seemed as though the future of the Empire hung in the balance. But slowly, one by one, the council members began to nod. The change was coming. It had to. Ethan could feel the shift in the air. This was the beginning of something new, a future where the Tsaran Empire and humanity could work together, side by side. It wouldn't be easy, but with Lyra leading them, it was possible. As the council members began to speak among themselves, Ethan turned to Lyra. You did it, he said softly. Lyra smiled, her eyes filled with the weight of responsibility, but also a newfound hope. We did it, she corrected him. And now, we begin the hard work of creating a new future. As they stood there, surrounded by allies and enemies alike, Ethan knew that the journey ahead would be long. But for the first time, he believed that peace was possible. And with that belief, they would face whatever came next, together.